Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 384. What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday night. If you're a football fan and you're not a fan of the Patriots, you most certainly enjoyed what occurred tonight. Watching those dudes get smashed, always a good time. You know what else is always a good time, folks? When Ghislaine Maxwell is denied bail. And that also happened today. Judge Nathan, not buying into any of the BS that Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team was tossing around, decided to slap them with another big, fat no. So Ghislaine Maxwell not only had to spend Christmas in jail, Christmas Eve in jail, her birthday in jail, but she will be spending the new year in lockup as well. Now, I don't know what sort of celebration's going to occur inside of that cell. Maybe she'll bang a cup against the old bars like they used to do in the old days, slamming the pots and pans outside of the houses and stuff. But one thing is for sure. She won't be sipping no bubbly. She won't be palling around at Jeff Bezos' house. None of that's occurring. She'll be sitting in a federal lockup, the same place where she was sitting for Christmas. And she deserves to be there. The only person at this point in time, I think, that disagrees besides her team is Geraldo Rivera. And if you see this moron's tweet about Ghislaine Maxwell not getting bail, it's obvious that he is still suffering from brain damage from the 1988 incident on set where he caught a chair to the face. Because somebody whose brain is working correctly most certainly can't side with the bipedal serpent here. It's not like she is somebody without means, right? If this was somebody who was without means and she couldn't leave the country, she didn't have passports, citizenship to other places like France without extradition, then, you know, the bail argument would hold a little bit more weight, perhaps. But even then, we saw that Epstein attempted to put up a cool $100 million to be bailed out. And that wasn't enough either. He had all kinds of petitioners as well, remember? Glenn and Eva Dubin, Ghislaine Maxwell, the bipedal serpent herself, and a whole list of other dirtbags. But Ghislaine Maxwell, she has that passport. She has the ability to boogie on out to France. Even if people will say, oh, it's unlikely, she won't do that, that's not going to happen, she'll ruin her family. How are we supposed to trust her? How are we supposed to trust a bipedal serpent who's slithering around all the time, lying, thieving, and you name it, according to allegations? And why would anyone think that this lady would not book if she thought that she was going to be facing a life sentence? And remember, this is just the first few charges. Wait until they start dropping some RICO charges on this bat, and we'll see then. You want to talk about panic mode. You want to talk about really being up against it. Once you start looking at those RICO charges and you start looking at Keith Raniere time, well, that does a whole lot of popping of the hubris bubble, doesn't it? Goes a long way for that to occur when you're staring down that sort of jail time. And Ghislaine Maxwell is in imminent danger of that at least. I mean, with these charges here, she's looking at 35. Now, think about when they start slapping racketeering charges on her, conspiracy charges on her. Oh yeah, a leadership charge. And she's staring down the barrel at a very, very, very long time in prison. So anyone who thinks that it wouldn't cross her mind to skate and try and get away from all of that, I don't know what to tell you. I guess the counter would be, well, she'll hire a security team. Yeah, okay, well, it's okay. Where are they from? I mean, how do we know that they're trustworthy? Are they ex-Mossad? Are they ex-CIA? Are they Blackwater? Who are they? The names were redacted, remember, in the filing about the security company. So we don't even know who this alleged security company is. But they would have you believe that this security company is willing to stake its reputation and $1 million on the fact that Maxwell will go nowhere. Big deal, $1 million to these people? Pocket change, buy-off money, hush money. $1 million does not mean anything to these people. And the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell's camp thought that their baseless, ridiculous arguments and all of their new quote-unquote revelations in the case were going to move the needle and shake Nathan from her perch, well, we knew that wasn't going to occur, right? I was pretty sure that she'd be getting her bail denied here. Now, nothing is 100% lock, right? When we're dealing with the courts, nothing is ever a sure thing when we're dealing with the United States federal government. That much is for sure. But as sure as you could be, that's about how sure I was that this bail would get denied. Now, all of these other circumstances around it, the COVID and the other stuff, well, that obviously could have thrown a wrench into the spokes, right? A little stick into the spokes, but it didn't. Nathan is not playing around with Maxwell. It sure seems to me that Nathan and the prosecutors and everybody involved on the inside are pretty sure where this case is going. They have a mountain of evidence, folks. That is for sure, 100% without a doubt. They have a mountain of evidence. And not only do they have a mountain of evidence, they have something that very rarely do you see. And that is a line of people who are willing to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell. You don't see that in RICO cases for the most part, right? A whole bunch of people lining up to testify because a lot of times it's the mafia or, you're dealing with cartels. Now, you'll have people who testify, and that'll be people who are ratting from the inside, but normal citizens don't want to get wrapped up in that kind of stuff for sure. Dealing with the mafia or, the cartels, certainly not the route that you want to find yourself dealing with. And that's what happens, right? If you come out and you're a witness against somebody like that, be in big trouble. But now that the facade has been ripped down from the Epstein operation, with Epstein dead, Maxwell in jail, looking at a bazillion years in prison, Jean-Luc Prunel also in jail, there's going to be just a line of actual survivors and people who say they were abused by this lady directly willing to testify against her. And that carries so much more weight, obviously, than any evidence that could be provided as far as, whatever sort of legwork the detectives are doing. That firsthand testimony from the abused is the death knell for Ghislaine Maxwell. There's no technicality that's going to get you off after a jury of your peers hears what Annie Farmer has to say. So Ghislaine Maxwell knows that the time is almost up, and I think that this bail attempt was her last-ditch effort to try and get a few more months outside of the confines of a jail cell, right? I think she understands that she's not going to beat these charges. I think she understands that she's going to prison. And I think the only question remaining at this point is, for how long? So let's jump into our article tonight from Law and Crime, and let's see what Mr. Adam Klasfeld has to say about Ghislaine Maxwell being denied bail once again. Judge denies flight risk Ghislaine Maxwell's second attempt to get out of jail ahead of Jeffrey Epstein related trial. Like I said, authored by Adam Klasfeld. And if you don't follow Adam over at Twitter, which I'm sure just about all of you do at this point, you definitely should. He has a lot of good breaking stories about this case. And like I always say, Law and Crime has done a very solid job breaking this case down into terms that laymen like us can understand. A federal judge denied Ghislaine Maxwell's second bail application on Monday, finding that Jeffrey Epstein's accused accomplice, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag and bipedal serpent, could not be trusted to stay in the United States if allowed to await trial at home before the new year. And it's a solid strategy by the judge here. Imagine being Judge Nathan and you grant her bail and she bounces. Imagine what kind of moron you look like as a judge. You let this woman, this sicko with all of this money, these passports, all of these connections, this is the lady that you think it's a good idea to give bail to. Meanwhile, some dude who got busted with, half an ounce of coke, that dude ain't ever getting no chance at no bail. Forget it. That dude's getting a 10-year minimum. They don't even want to hear shit about it. But Ghislaine Maxwell, on the other hand, 19 bail applications. The court concludes that none of the new information that the defendant presented in support of her application has a material bearing on the court's determination that she poses a flight risk. U.S. District Judge Allison Nathan wrote in a 2-page ruling. This is what we've been talking about here on the podcast, and if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and consistently, you know that this is what I've been saying, that this new information is not going to move the needle. There's nothing earth-shattering here, and this bail attempt is going to prove fruitless, and Maxwell will once again get slapped with a big, fat L. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Again, it's not about innocence or guilt with Maxwell. I'm convinced of that at this point. It is all about the technicalities. How can we look for a loophole? How can we navigate this? How can we make it look like Ghislaine is the victim? And that's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to set up. That's what they've always been trying to set up here. It's not a conversation about guilt or innocence for her team, in my opinion. Because they know that's not a winning strategy, right? Oh, sure, they'll say, oh, our client is innocent, blah, 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 blah. But really, every bit of strategy that we have seen so far is not providing receipts. It's not providing alibis, none of that. It is all about technicalities. Oh, this, that, the other thing. This case interferes with that case. I want this sealed. I want that sealed. Oh, the government's treating me wrong. Oh, they're looking at me every 5 minutes with a flashlight. Oh, I can't be a general population. I can't have my favorite lettuce wrap sandwiches from the place I went and ate with Slick Willie. This is the kind of nonsense that we've had to hear from her. This is the sort of nonsense that this lady has been yammering about. And frankly, not only are we tired of it, Judge Nathan doesn't want to hear it anymore either, obviously. In July, Judge Nathan feared that Maxwell would try to flee if allowed to await trial outside of jail. Why wouldn't she think that? The risks are simply too great, Nathan found, following a hearing where Maxwell pleaded not guilty to 6 charges, accusing her of grooming and abusing Epstein survivors, and lying about it under oath. When you have impassioned pleas from survivors like Annie and the written letter from the other survivor, and you have these kind of letters read allowed in court to the judge, and you have all of these other mitigating factors surrounding the case, meaning her means, meaning her ability to scoot if she wants to bounce, how she's already been living on the lam for over a year, and you wrap all of that stuff up, and I don't see how any judge in good faith would allow bail in this case. The risks are simply too great, Nathan found, following a hearing where Maxwell pleaded not guilty to 6 charges, accusing her of grooming and abusing Epstein survivors and lying about it under oath. It just really is just too great of a risk. And I mean that sincerely. Look, I'm not saying she's going to go out on some kind of kidnapping spree and abusing a bunch of people while she's out, but the risk of flight is too great. And that is certainly something that the court has to take into account when we're dealing with foreign nationals, especially. For the judge, little has changed to alter her opinion. Furthermore, for substantially the same reasons as the court determined that detention was warranted in the initial bail hearing, the court again concludes that no conditions of release can reasonably assure the defendant's appearance at future proceedings. So, again, the judge is adamant here. And Nathan has said this from the very beginning. She is not going to let Ghislaine Maxwell out of lockup on her watch to potentially disappear into the wind. We're not talking about somebody who has to go live with their mom, who can be monitored, who everybody knows where they are. We're talking about somebody who could disappear in the middle of the night with all of the contacts she has. Obviously, there's a bunch of people that are still willing to help her if they're willing to sign their name on the dotted line to get her out of jail. You're telling me they won't let her stay at their houses or at their chalets or their bunkers? Who the hell knows what these crazy people have? So, yeah, she is a big-time risk, and she is exactly where she belongs, in my opinion. Judge Nathan added, in reaching that conclusion, the court considers the nature and circumstances of the offenses charged, the weight of the evidence against the defendant, the history and characteristics of the defendant, and the nature and seriousness of the danger that the defendant's release would pose. And I think it's interesting that Judge Nathan talks about the weight of the evidence against the defendant because, again, even just talking circumstantially, even just talking about the evidence that we know as the public, and it's not good. All roads lead to Ghislaine Maxwell really not being in a position where she can defend her innocence at this point. All of these girls lied. All of these little 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls lied. So they all got together and came up with this big story just to put the screws to Ghislaine Maxwell. Is that going to be the defense? Because we know that the reality certainly is painting a different picture, it would seem. And that picture would be Ghislaine Maxwell not only involved, but in a leadership role as all of this unfolded. Prosecutors from the Southern District of New York's Public Corruption Unit depicted Maxwell as living life in the shadows, traveling frequently with 3 passports and owning more than a dozen bank accounts, assuming the alter ego G Max. Now, I posted earlier in one of the flashback episodes about the Public Corruptions Unit handling this case. And as we were talking about Maxwell and what's been going on, I thought that would be a good refresher course for us to add to the catalog. And now it definitely looms large, right? It's again brought up by Adam Klasfeld, and it's a big part of the case that I think is important. The Public Corruptions Unit handling this case, it doesn't seem like the right unit unless there is a lot more that we don't know about. because you would think it would be Crimes Against Children, Violent Crimes Division that would be handling this. But with the Public Corruptions Unit, very interesting indeed. So you definitely want to check that segment out that I dropped earlier if you have not listened to that yet. After a coronavirus scare inside Brooklyn's Metropolitan Correctional Center, where she has been awaiting trial, Maxwell renewed her application right on the back of the COVID-19 outbreak. Like clockwork. Almost like I have a crystal ball and I can see into the future about what the bipedal serpent strategy is going to be next. We knew she was going to be riding the coattails of COVID, trying to get herself sprung from the hoosegow. They'll cling on to anything. A drowning man will cling on to anything in the ocean, right? Same goes for Ghislaine Maxwell here. And if COVID was going to be the vehicle to get her ass out of jail, you better be damn sure she was gassing that bad boy up and hopping in. She disclosed more details about her finances and claimed that secret marriage that she entered into proved her ties to the United States, which she argued would keep her from returning to France or the United Kingdom. Yeah, because Ghislaine Maxwell is known as such a loving, caring, loyal companion that her relationship of 4 years would anchor her here in the United States when she's facing over a century in prison. If these RICO cases come to fruition anyway. At the very least, facing 3 decades in prison. She's not going to run, huh? Her 4-year relationship that she came into and destroyed the home of Borgerson's wife and kids in the first place, that's the person that she's just so madly in love with that she's willing to stick around and face the charges. That's the narrative. That's what they would have you believe. Because again, that is exactly how the bipedal serpent conducts herself. Maxwell holds citizenship in both countries, which do not extradite people to the United States often. So yeah, right, there's always a chance. And there is a Twitter user who pointed out that there has been extraditions before, and that's definitely the case, right? But it's not something that happens often. And you've seen it with Polanski, and you see it quite a bit, honestly. So is there never going to be a situation where there's extradition to the United States from France? No, of course there has been, I'm sure. But it's not something that I think you will see on a regular basis. Splashing cold water over Maxwell's tales of marital bliss, prosecutors reveal that she told authorities that she and her husband were in the process of getting divorced. So that's when she first talked to the intake team, etc., etc. They were building the profile. She laid it out like she was getting divorced. And then her excuse was, I was just trying to protect Scott. Well, maybe Scott should have never started dicking around with you, literally and figuratively. And he should have stuck around to raise his kids. But he's obviously a scumbag. On this point, it bears noting that the defendant's motion asks that she be permitted to live with redacted, if granted bail, not her spouse, the government's brief stated, shielding the name of the other person. I mean, I can only imagine. Like I said, maybe her and Dershowitz are going to get bunk beds. And it'll be like Step Brothers. They'll have room for activities and calisthenics. I mean, for real? Not living with your loving spouse? You're going to live with somebody else? What does that even mean? I'm pretty sure Carrie would not be too happy with me, okay? So I don't even know how she could act like, my loving spouse, I'm going to miss him so much, when you're not even talking about living with old boy, if you get sprung. Moreover, the fact that the defendant's spouse has only now come forward to support the defendant should be afforded little weight, given that he refused to come forward at the time of her arrest. While a friend's desire to avoid publicity may be understandable, a spouse's desire to distance himself in that manner, particularly when coupled with the defendant's inconsistent statements about the state of their relationship, undermine her assertion that her marriage is a tie that would keep her in the United States. And that's 100% fact. That is the exact way to interpret that. What do you mean you're not going to live with your loving spouse? Maxwell's attorney, Mark Cohen, insisted that was because Maxwell had been trying to protect her spouse. Well, if she was trying to protect her spouse, she would have never made him her spouse in the first place. She would have figured all of this out. She would have come forward when Jeffrey Epstein was arrested if she was really worried about what's going on. But we all know that's not the case. We all know that the bipedal serpent doesn't care about anybody else. All of this is a ruse to try and build a little bit of sympathy for herself. But nobody's buying it. That ship has sailed long ago, Ghislaine. You tried with LG to contaminate the waters. You've always tried to contaminate the waters. You weren't worried about Borgerson. It was all about you and how to protect your money. That is most certainly how it seems to me. Prior to her arrest, Miss Maxwell and her spouse had discussed the idea of getting a divorce as an additional way to create distance between Miss Maxwell and her spouse to protect him, redacted, from the terrible consequences of being associated with her, Cohen said. The terrible consequences of being associated with her. That doesn't tell you all you need to know, Scott Borgerson? Your cousin from Boston. You dumb moron. You idiot. You really think anyone cares if your life is being invaded by some reporters now that you've been outed as Ghislaine Maxwell's husband? Sorry, dude, that comes with the territory. If you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're eventually going to get a cut. Submitting many of their arguments under seal, Maxwell's lawyers contend that revealing the names or identifying information about the friends and family supporting their client's renewed bail application would put them at risk. Judge Nathan issued the 2-page order to protect their privacy while giving prosecutors and defense attorneys 48 hours to propose redactions to her fuller ruling. And as usual, you can find the 2-page ruling here in the article. When you go to the description box, click on the link, and then just follow the hyperlink at the very bottom. Actually, you don't even need to follow the hyperlink. It's embedded in the article. So when you click on it, you'll be able to read the ruling for yourself and see just exactly the smackdown that Judge Nathan has once again administered to the bipedal serpent's legal team. And folks, I couldn't be happier about it. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we will pick up where we left off. Hope all of you have a great night.